Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for September 24th, 2024. As we've been reporting to you over the last weeks, we're in what is probably the most dangerous period in history that we've been in perhaps ever. That's the assessment of Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who, in looking at the series of crises and the absolutely pathetic quality of leadership in the Western world, we're heading into a moment of history rudderless, with a direction which is moving toward chaos and war. And the voices are starting to be raised against it, but it must be really carried through by a change in thinking. And by that I mean it's up to all of us to fight to change the quality of thinking which has gotten us into this crisis, which is basically not thinking at all, no critical thinking. Let's just look at the recent developments. You have in Lebanon now virtually a full-scale war as the Israelis have decided to escalate their attacks on Hezbollah and ultimately against Iran, with the intention of bringing the United States into a war in Southwest Asia. There's chaos in southern Lebanon. The heaviest Israeli attack since 2006. Targets are including weapon sites where Hezbollah has stockpiled missiles and drones. Israel hit more than 800 of these yesterday. In the last days, Israel has conducted an operation to explode pagers and other electronic communication devices. They've carried out assassinations. It's estimated that the bombings have killed more than 500 people, including a large number of civilians. Now then you have the response from the United States, from Biden, from Blinken, from Sullivan. We're working hard to get a ceasefire in Gaza, because essentially Hezbollah has carried out some attacks on Israel in support of the people of Gaza. And the Hezbollah said they would stop this if there were a ceasefire and an agreement to end the occupation in Gaza. But instead, we're getting an escalation from Netanyahu and what is now increasingly seen worldwide as a terrorist regime in Israel. Now, the Blinken, Sullivan, Biden team, Harris as well, who say they're working so hard, they're refusing to do the one thing which would actually work, which is to say to Israel, no more military support, no more money, no more political cover for your genocide until you stop. Now, what you can conclude from this is that the Biden administration is either lying or impotent or both, or else they're doing exactly what they intend to do because they support the war. Secondly, that Israel is committed to ethnic cleansing. And third, while the U.S. is protecting Israel, Israel is becoming increasingly isolated in the rest of the world, as is the United States, with the exception of the subordinated non-sovereign states of Europe. Now, one example of the shift in thinking toward Israel was a statement from Leon Panetta, the former U.S. Defense Secretary and CIA Director. Panetta said that the pager attack is nothing other than terrorism. So when a top U.S. official identifies Israel's actions as terrorism, you get a sense of a shift in the thinking about what Netanyahu is doing to try and preserve his political power and his own freedom. Now, the Ukraine issue is coming up at the United Nations, and let me just catch you up on what's going on there. Probably one of the most significant events was the election Sunday in the state of Brandenburg in Germany, because this was now the third state in eastern Germany in which the Schulz coalition was hit very hard. Now in Brandenburg, Schulz came out as the leader. The Social Democrats got slightly over 30%. The Alternative for Deutschland which is a anti-war, pro-peace, anti-green party, came in about 1.2% behind Schultz. But Schultz's victory was not his own victory. The Christian Democrats sent some votes over to Schultz. That is, the CDU lost at least 2.5% of its vote from the last time. So the SPD vote went up because of another party voting for it. Meanwhile, the two other coalition partners, the Greens and the Free Democrats, fell below the 5% level required to be in the parliament. Now, what that continues is the trend we saw 3 weeks ago in Thuringia and in Saxony, where the Greens and the Free Democrats, the two coalition partners, in one case the Greens barely survived, but in the other two cases, neither of those two coalition partners survived. And Schultz's party itself has been weakened. Now, what is Schultz going to do? There's a government in Germany with less than 30% support from the population. Now, the coalition partners are down. Schultz, in his campaigning in Brandenburg, said that he would not allow the Taurus missiles, the long-range German missiles, to be deployed in Ukraine. And he said he will not change his opinion. Well, we'll see about that. But that represents a shift. The voters forced Schultz to change his position. And that's an indication of what people power can do. But what about the consequences from the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines and the fact that high energy prices are destroying German industry? What is he going to change his mind about agreeing to accept U.S. long-range nuclear-capable missiles in Germany in 2026? Will Schultz change that? Now, one sane voice that spoke out this weekend was the former German Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder, who's a member of Schultz's party, although they're trying to get rid of him. Schroeder said, if you think Russia can be beaten, look at history. And he said, from Napoleon to Hitler, everyone who tried was defeated. And Schroeder then pointed out that he was involved in the peace talks in Istanbul in March 2022, in which an agreement was reached between the Zelensky government and Putin to end the war, which had just started, with an agreement that Ukraine would be neutral and would not go into NATO. That peace was sabotaged. And who sabotaged it? The Biden administration and NATO, and in particular, Boris Johnson, the buffoon former Prime Minister of Great Britain. Now we're seeing that whole British gang coalescing around another buffoon, another puppet of the City of London, Keir Starmer, the current Prime Minister. They're planning a gang up at the UN General Assembly on Biden. Zelensky today will be addressing the UN Security Council. He has a meeting scheduled with Biden and Harris in the next couple of days. And Starmer's going to be there with a group of other NATO countries committed to the war in Ukraine against Russia. Now, so we're heading into a moment where there's a potential for an explosion of conflicts in Ukraine and Southwest Asia. Conflicts which are pointing toward an actual World War III, which could easily become a nuclear war. Now, if you haven't seen it, I'm going to be attaching again the video of the Zoom call from Friday the 13th, in which Dennis Small, my colleague, and then Scott Ritter presented virtually everything you need to know about the crisis, the economic background to it, the opposition to the war, and the potential to resolve it with a new security and development architecture. And this begins from the beginning of the tape for the first 37 minutes. Share it, watch it, get it out. What Ritter pointed out is you could have been dead by a week ago Saturday, had Biden not pulled back from sending the missiles or giving the go-ahead for the missiles to be used. The only thing that can save you now is not the Biden administration, not the Harris administration, but an outpouring of voices in support of peace and peace based on development. The courage to think for ourselves, that's what's necessary to turn this crisis around. And I know that a lot of you are thinking about doing things, what more you can do. Be creative. Join with us. There are demonstrations coming up, but the most important thing is thinking and spreading a quality of thinking that gets beyond the going along to get along that characterizes politics today. I won't be with you tomorrow. My young associate Simon Miller will, but I'll be back Thursday and Friday with the daily update.